First up, it is the last few days before we announce the winner of our Switch 2 giveaway. Congrats in advance to whoever wins it. We will let you know in a community post, so do make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Yeah, the wording on the thumbnail, whatever one I went for, it's not clickbait. This is 100% one of the best upgrades for absolutely nothing that we've seen in terms of performance and visuals, and there are a number of factors that contribute to it. I'm really pleased, honestly, because this was one of my favourite games in terms of gameplay, but it was the worst in the trilogy as far as performance goes. Well, it was close to number 2 actually, but we'll talk about that in a minute as well. So how does Darksiders 3 perform on the Nintendo Switch 2? And is it as good as Mark says, or is he being a hyperbolic fool? Well, I am Mark. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. So when the first Darksiders came out on Switch, it had a quality and a performance mode that ran at 60 frames per second. Obviously the quality mode focused on resolution and visuals, and it looked cracking, but running it at 60 was the way to go, at least in my opinion, and it was just impressive the amount of work they'd put into it. That one sold really well, and they then went on to release Darksiders 2, which I think probably deserves its own video, but suffice to say performance wasn't the same. You didn't have a performance or a quality mode anymore. You had one mode and it was bad, and the frame rates would drop down. It was just a nightmare. Then when we got Darksiders 3, it was kind of somewhere in the middle. The first few areas were running between 30 and 40. It would drop below 30 frames per second a little bit, but then you'd hit the mid game or some of the more intense fight scenes and the frame rate would just tank. Now the third game was much more open. It had more of a Souls-like feel to it, with reactionary fast combat that it will become apparent I am very rusty at. It's weird, isn't it, when you come back to a game after a while and your brain has completely forgotten all of its muscle memory. I mean, I thought that was the point. I thought it was supposed to be muscle memory. I thought it was supposed to be in there regardless of your brain. Well, I think I've proved that one wrong, or I'm just really old. So yeah, originally Darksiders 3 on Switch 1, I was really annoyed by the performance. It was shocking. It had glitches and bugs. It was really janky. Just a disappointment across the board. Now, a couple of things to note. With a lot of these Switch upgrades, or at least the unofficial upgrade provided by the performance, there are a few key factors you can look out for. If a game has an uncapped frame rate, then it's very much worth testing on Switch 2. If it's dynamic resolution scaling, or at least a title that enables that, then that's another one that can be really good on Switch 2, because both of those can be drastically affected just by a hardware bump, and that then takes us over to the Nintendo Switch 2 performance. Let's be honest, it's absolutely glorious. You're looking at a 16 millisecond frame time that barely ever changes. There are a couple of very minor stutters, usually caused by loading between one area and the next, but you have to actually look out for those rather than the usual scenario where they're just 10 a penny. That 60 frames per second is flawless. It means that the combat within this one is so much more enjoyable than when I first played it. As I just mentioned, yeah, I'm really rusty. My brain has got so many different lock-on mechanics in it that I keep holding the trigger down, whereas in this one it's a toggle, and if you dodge at just the right moment, then you can perform that slow-mo parry. Fury is a great character as well. I forgot how much I liked her as a protagonist. She can also use her whip to swing around the environment, and that's another area, the platforming, that is so much better with this 60 frames per second. That performance obviously carries over to handheld mode as well, and this is one I am certainly going to be starting from scratch and playing through from start to finish because it doesn't feel the same anymore. It's why the first game felt so good, was just the fact that they'd gone for that performance mode. And it is, in my opinion, a bit like racing games, one genre that frame rate massively affects gameplay. An important point of note, because this isn't patched, the same glitches for cutscenes do remain. So the early cutscenes, they wouldn't load in the textures. It seemed like something had gone awry in the programming stage, or at least they'd pulled back in terms of visual quality to such an extent that it just didn't render in those textures at some times. That remains in some cutscenes, and also those aren't rendered at 60 FPS, so you will still see a 30 FPS cutscene, but the load times in between them they are much better than before. The same goes almost for every Switch 1 game running on Switch 2. You'll see about a 50 to 100% increase in the overall speed of load times, which is great. So on the visuals front, well, it was actually quite nice looking when it originally released. There were some locations and the general lighting I really enjoyed. I thought it was a great artistic direction. The animations were also enjoyable, but hindered by that frame rate. Now the visual quality is as good as it can be on Switch without a patch, so it can maintain its resolution all the time. It looks surprisingly good in motion. One area that you can't really address with these patches, and it's something that's so bad on the original Switch that people that don't play PC probably will never have heard of, and I always say this wrong, it's anisotropic filtering. It's essentially the filtering that affects the texture sharpness the further it is away from the player character. On PC, you'd tend to set this to 16 times and you'd have really crisp, distant textures. On Switch 1 games, I mean, you didn't get anywhere close to that. You would have different degrees of mud moving away from the character. Thankfully, resolution here, while it may not affect the anisotropic filtering, does mean that textures look a little sharper. Again, without being able to peek underneath the hood and see exactly what settings they went for, it's very difficult to say, but you can, just by looking at the two different games, say, yes, one is certainly looking better. Now, I mentioned in the last video that we were kind of putting a shout out to the community to try and help populate a massive Excel spreadsheet with all of the games people have tested and the varying effects that those have had. Now, a few people have come forward, so thanks so much. You've emailed me and they're starting to gather information on the games they've played and just give me basically some info by email about how those have performed, and then I'll populate the spreadsheet. The reason we're not opening the spreadsheet up to everyone is because invariably someone will be a bad actor and will mess with it or delete something. And yes, there are ways to avoid that, but it's just easier if you email me directly and then I'll upload it. Obviously, keeping a record of who's done what. I'll even put a little note saying your name on the record and we'll give everyone read access to that Excel sheet. So yeah, it's really nice. The community are getting involved in it. I think it's something that it's just nice having some free updates to these games that don't require anything extra, and this is by far one of the best I've seen. Let me know in the comments what are the best ones that you've experienced so far. I have tested a few that you've been asking for, things like XCOM 2. I've started playing, load times are better, visual quality is still pretty bad, but I think for many it was those load times that were the main issue, so I'll try and get that video out relatively soon. I've been playing through Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and that also is, I love that game so much. The sea shanties are amazing. It looks crispy. It was always quite good though, so don't expect more than just a completely locked 30. And also Divinity Original Sin 2, that's the name, isn't it? Doesn't sound right, but yeah, I'm sure it is. Again, much better performance, visuals, well, we'll have a look at them. And it's funny, another game, like many of these, like all of us that have massive backlogs, you go back and test something, and before you know it, you've spent 6 hours because you just remember how much you love that game. That keeps happening to me, and it's what's taken me so long to get these videos out. Thank you so much to all of you that seem to enjoy this content. Thank you to our Patreons, our members. Oh, and yes, I will be bringing Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3. I'm working on those, but they're quite massive to do. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!